Nathan Miller froze in the darkened hallway of his own home, keys still dangling from his fingertips. The silence shouldn't have been there, not in a house with a 5-year-old son. Something was wrong. Martha from next door had promised to stay until he arrived, but her car was gone, the driveway empty except for Elaine's gleaming BMW that hadn't been there 3 months ago. His combat instincts flared like warning flares as he moved through the unfamiliar furniture arrangement, past lavender candles he'd never bought, toward the staircase. The framed photos of Ethan had vanished from the walls. Then he heard it, so faint he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. A whisper from upstairs, small and broken. "Daddy, don't let them know I talked to you." What had happened in the 97 days he'd been gone, and was he already too late? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The house was a museum of wrongness. Every detail screamed that something had shifted in Nathan's absence. From the pristine countertops where Ethan's colorful artwork once hung to the rearranged furniture positioned at angles his son might trip over. The air smelled of artificial lavender and lemon, not the chocolate chip cookies and Play-Doh scents that had defined his home. Nathan set his duffel bag down quietly, military training taking over as he scanned for threats. 3 months at the Special Forces training facility in Nevada had honed his already sharp instincts. Something felt off, like the calm before an ambush. His marriage to Elaine had been quick, perhaps too quick, he now realized. After Sarah's death in that terrible accident 2 years ago, he'd been desperate to create stability for Ethan. Elaine seemed perfect, patient with his grieving son, understanding of his military commitments, always smiling and supportive. They'd married after only 8 months, just before he received orders for this specialized training that allowed no contact with family. Nathan moved silently up the stairs, avoiding the 3rd step that always creaked. Ethan's room was at the end of the hall, door closed. It had never been closed before. His son had been afraid of the dark since Sarah died. A framed photo on the hallway table caught his eye. It showed Elaine, Ethan, and a young man Nathan had never seen before. Handsome, with Elaine's same sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. Ethan's smile in the photo looked strained, his eyes vacant. Nathan gently pushed open Ethan's bedroom door. The dinosaur nightlight was unplugged, the room pitch black. The floor was spotless, unsettling for a 5-year-old boy's room. No scattered toys, no half-finished art projects. "Ethan?" he whispered. A rustling came from the closet, then silence. Nathan crossed the room and slowly opened the closet door. There, huddled in the corner beneath hanging clothes, was his son, clutching a broken toy soldier. In the dim light filtering from the hallway, Nathan could see Ethan's eyes, wide, fearful, and somehow older. "Hey, buddy," Nathan whispered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm home." Ethan didn't move to hug him, didn't smile. Instead, he pressed his finger to his lips and whispered, "They check on me at night. They can't know you're here yet." "Who checks on you, buddy?" "Mom and Uncle Ricky. They play the monster game when you're gone." Nathan felt his blood freeze. He gently reached for his son, and as Ethan shifted, his pajama sleeve rode up. In the dim light, Nathan could see the unmistakable pattern of finger-shaped bruises on his tiny wrist. Nathan's military training had prepared him for many scenarios, hostile territory, ambushes, psychological warfare, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The bruises on his son's wrist were unmistakable. 4 small marks and 1 larger one, the pattern of an adult hand gripping too tightly. "Ethan," he whispered, fighting to keep his voice steady, "I need you to tell me about the monster game." The boy's eyes darted toward the door, his small body tensing. "If I tell, the monster gets bigger. he whispered. "Uncle Ricky says monsters feed on secrets when they're told." Nathan heard footsteps on the stairs, light and measured. He quickly pressed his finger to his lips and moved to the bedroom door, positioning himself behind it. The hallway light cast a thin beam across the floor as the door pushed open. "Ethan?" Elaine's voice was honey-sweet, nothing like the tense whispers Nathan had heard from downstairs. "Who were you talking to, sweetheart?" From his hiding spot, Nathan could see his son's face transform, eyes downcast, shoulders hunched, a mask of compliance sliding into place with practiced ease. "My soldiers," Ethan mumbled, pulling the broken toy tighter to his chest. Elaine stepped into the room, and Nathan saw her for the first time in 3 months. She looked polished, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves, wearing silk pajamas he'd never seen before. Nothing like the woman who'd hugged him goodbye at the airport, promising to take good care of his son. "You should be sleeping," she said, her voice carrying an edge beneath the sweetness. "Remember what happens to little boys who don't follow the rules?" Nathan saw his son flinch, a tiny movement most would miss. "They get taken away by the monster," Ethan recited, voice flat. "That's right." Elaine smiled, reaching down to brush his hair back in what would appear to be a loving gesture to anyone watching. But Nathan saw how his son tensed at her touch. "Now go to sleep. And remember, don't make noise," Ethan finished. Elaine nodded and turned, pulling the door closed behind her. Nathan remained frozen, waiting until her footsteps receded down the hall, hearing another door close before he moved back to his son. "I'm going to fix this," he promised, his voice a bare whisper. "But first, I need to understand what's happening. Can you be brave for me?" Ethan looked up, his eyes too old for a 5-year-old. "Are you going away again?" The question pierced Nathan's heart like shrapnel. "Nobody. I'm staying right here." Over the next hour, as the house settled into silence, Nathan pieced together fragments of the horror that had unfolded in his absence. The monster game involved Ethan being locked in the closet when he broke arbitrary rules that changed daily. Uncle Ricky was Elaine's younger brother who had moved in shortly after Nathan's deployment. The bruises weren't limited to Ethan's wrists. They mapped a constellation of cruelty across his small back, his legs, his arms. "Mom says I'm clumsy," Ethan explained when Nathan asked about a particularly dark bruise on his shoulder. "Dr. Reynolds says I need to be more careful." Dr. Reynolds? Nathan's jaw tightened. The pediatrician who had cared for Ethan since he was born should have recognized the signs. "When did you last see Dr. Reynolds?" Nathan asked gently. "After I fell down the stairs," Ethan said. "But I didn't fall. Uncle Ricky pushed me because I spilled juice on his game controller. Mom told Dr. Reynolds I was running in the house." Nathan swallowed hard, rage building in his chest. He took several deep breaths, knowing he needed to stay calm for his son's sake. "Is there anyone else who comes to the house when I'm gone?" Ethan nodded. "Grandma Margaret. She pinches when no one's looking and says, 'I'm a burden.'" The pieces were falling into place, a family conspiracy of abuse targeting his son. Nathan needed evidence, needed allies, needed time. His leave was only 7 days before he was expected back at his unit. "Ethan, I need to take some pictures of your bruises. Is that okay? It will help me make sure the monsters go away forever." Ethan nodded solemnly. Nathan used his phone, documenting each mark with military precision, his hands steady even as his heart shattered. When he finished, he helped Ethan back into his pajamas. "Tomorrow, I'm going to take you to school myself," Nathan said. "And afterwards, we're going to start fixing this. But tonight, I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that?" "Will you stay?" Ethan asked, his voice small. "I'll be right here in the house. If you need me, use this." Nathan pressed a small object into Ethan's hand, a simple metal whistle on a cord. Just one quiet blow and I'll come running. It's our secret weapon against monsters." For the first time that night, a ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. The next morning, Nathan navigated a domestic minefield. He feigned surprise at Elaine's changes to the house, pretended not to notice how she positioned herself between him and Ethan at breakfast, smiled through her explanation of Uncle Ricky staying with them just until he finds a new apartment. Ricky was sleeping in when Nathan first came downstairs. Convenient, he thought bitterly. The young man in the photo was apparently sleeping in what used to be Nathan's home office. "I'll take Ethan to school today," Nathan announced casually. "Give us some father-son time to catch up." A flash of something, annoyance, fear, crossed Elaine's face before her perfect smile returned. "That's sweet, but I always take him. We have a routine." "I insist," Nathan said, his tone light but firm. Military command voice, Sarah used to call it. "Besides, I want to meet his teacher." In the car, Ethan sat quietly in his booster seat, eyes scanning constantly as if watching for threats. Nathan's heart broke anew at the hypervigilance, the same look he'd seen in children in war zones. "Your teacher, Ms. Taylor, right?" Nathan asked, checking his rearview mirror to ensure they weren't followed. Paranoid maybe, but necessary. "Do you like her?" Ethan nodded. "She gives me extra paper for drawing when I finish my work." "Has she ever asked about your bruises?" A pause. "Once. Mom told her I fell off the monkey bars. After that, Mom made me wear long sleeves to school." Oak Ridge Elementary was a cheerful building with colorful handprints decorating the entrance. Nathan walked Ethan to his classroom, his hand protective on his son's shoulder. The teacher, Bethany Taylor, was arranging books when they entered. "Mr. Miller?" she exclaimed, genuine surprise in her voice. "We didn't know you were back." "Just returned," Nathan said, watching her closely. "Thought I'd drop Ethan off myself today." Miss Taylor's eyes darted to Ethan, then back to Nathan. Something in her expression shifted. Concern, recognition. "It's good to have you home," she said carefully. "Ethan, why don't you put your backpack away? The early reading group is starting in the book corner." Once Ethan was out of earshot, Bethany's professional smile faded. "Mr. Miller, do you have a moment to talk?" They stepped into the hallway and Bethany's voice dropped. "I've been concerned about Ethan. His behavior changed dramatically about 2 months ago. He stopped participating in class, started drawing troubling pictures." "What kind of pictures?" Nathan asked, though he already suspected. Dark figures looming over small ones, closets with children inside. She hesitated. "I tried raising concerns with Mrs. Miller, but she explained that Ethan was processing your absence through imagination. She brought in Dr. Reynolds, who confirmed Ethan was simply having adjustment issues." "And the bruises?" Nathan pressed. Bethany's eyes widened slightly. "I reported my concerns to the principal after noticing marks on his wrists. He said without clear evidence, we couldn't risk falsely accusing a prominent family. Mrs. Miller is quite involved in the PTA and school fundraising." Nathan felt cold fury building. The system that should protect his son had been neutralized by Elaine's careful social engineering. "Miss Taylor, I need your help," Nathan said quietly. "I believe my son is being abused and I need to document a pattern to protect him. Can I count on you?" The teacher studied him for a long moment before nodding. "My mother was abused for years while neighbors looked the other way. I won't do the same." As Nathan left the school, he noticed an elderly woman watching him from across the street. Martha Sullivan, his next-door neighbor, leaning on her cane beside her parked car. She raised her hand in a tentative wave. Nathan crossed to her. "Mrs. Sullivan, what are you doing here?" Martha's weathered face was creased with concern. "I volunteer at the library Tuesdays. But I've been keeping an eye on your boy. Something's not right, Nathan. That brother of hers. I've heard shouting when they think no one's listening. Why didn't you call me? Nathan asked, struggling to keep accusation from his voice. Martha's eyes filled with tears. I tried. 3 times. Your wife said you were unreachable. Said you'd requested no contact during training. I called the base, but they wouldn't put me through without authorization codes. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Nathan had left contact information explicitly for emergencies, information Elaine had apparently intercepted. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to know everything you've seen, Nathan said. My son's safety depends on it. The elderly woman straightened her spine. Come by at noon. I've been keeping a diary. In my day, we knew it took a village to raise a child, not just to look the other way. Nathan spent the morning in calculated performance, a returning soldier happy to be home, catching up on missed moments with his wife. Each smile felt like betrayal to Ethan, but he needed time. Time to gather evidence, time to build a case that would ensure his son's safety. I thought we might take Ethan to the park this afternoon, Nathan suggested over coffee, watching Elaine's reaction carefully. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, he has his routine now. We don't want to disrupt that. Besides, Ricky promised to help him with his reading. Ricky seems very involved, Nathan commented mildly. I didn't realize you two were so close. Elaine stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against fine china that hadn't been in their home before. After Mom had her financial troubles, we reconnected. Family is everything, don't you think? Financial troubles. Nathan filed that information away. Speaking of family, I'd like to take Ethan to Dr. Reynolds for a checkup. Adjust routine. I missed his last appointment while deployed. I already took him last week, Elaine replied smoothly. Clean bill of health. He's just been a bit clumsy lately. Growth spurt, the doctor said. Nathan nodded, as if accepting this explanation. I'll still swing by his office. Reynolds and I go back. His son was in my unit in Afghanistan. A flicker of alarm crossed Elaine's face before she composed herself. I'm sure he's very busy. Perhaps call first? At precisely noon, Nathan made his excuse. A need to visit the base to file return paperwork, and walked the half-block to Martha Sullivan's modest Cape Cod home. The 78-year-old former nurse was waiting, a leather-bound journal and a shoebox on her kitchen table. I've been watching that house for 40 years, Martha said without preamble, her arthritic fingers opening the journal. Saw you bring that baby home from the hospital. Saw you bury Sarah. Saw that woman move in. Something ain't right with her or that brother. Martha's journal was meticulously detailed. Dates, times, observations, shouting at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. Ethan crying in the backyard while Ricky stood over him on a Thursday afternoon. Elaine pulling Ethan roughly by the arm into the house when he was playing too long with the neighbor's dog. Last month I heard a crash and a child screaming, Martha said, voice trembling with suppressed fury. Called 911. Officer came, but Elaine said Ethan had knocked over a bookshelf playing superhero. Officer didn't even ask to see the boy. Did you notice anything about my wife's mother visiting? Nathan asked. Martha's expression darkened. Margaret Wilson. That woman gives me chills. Comes in her fancy car, leaves with Elaine in tears half the time. Last week I heard her tell Elaine that the investment better pay off soon. Investment? That's what she called it. Said, I didn't arrange this investment for you to get soft now. Don't know what she meant. Nathan's mind raced. What investment could involve his family? His military benefits weren't substantial enough to warrant criminal behavior. Unless. Martha, do you remember when Sarah died? The insurance investigation? The elderly woman nodded slowly. The black ice on Miller's Curve. Terrible accident. Was it? Nathan murmured, more to himself than Martha. The second item on the table, the shoebox, contained something that made Nathan's blood run cold. Photographs taken with a telephoto lens showing Ethan's injuries over time. Martha had documented what appeared to be a systematic pattern of abuse. "I was a nurse for 43 years, she said grimly. "Those aren't from falls or childhood clumsiness. That's deliberate harm." Nathan squeezed the elderly woman's hand. "Martha, I may need your testimony. It could get ugly." Her chin lifted. "Son, I watched my neighbor beat his wife for 20 years while everyone minded their own business. She died from it. I'm done being quiet. Just tell me what you need." When Nathan left Martha's house, he drove straight to Oak Ridge Medical Center, where Dr. James Reynolds maintained his pediatric practice. The receptionist brightened when she saw him. "Captain Miller, welcome home. Dr. Reynolds is with a patient, but—" "I'll wait," Nathan said firmly, settling into a chair with a direct view of the hallway. No chance for the doctor to slip out. 20 minutes later, Reynolds emerged, tall, silver-haired, the picture of medical authority. His smile faltered when he spotted Nathan. "Nathan, good to see you back safe. What brings you in?" "My son," Nathan replied, rising. "Mind if we talk privately?" In Reynolds' office, the pretense of cordiality evaporated. Nathan placed Martha's photographs on the desk one by one. "These were taken over the past 3 months. Multiple contusions, potential fractures, signs of psychological trauma. Yet your records show only routine childhood injuries. Want to explain that, doctor?" Reynolds' face drained of color. "Nathan, you need to understand. What I understand is that you've failed in your duty as a physician. What I don't understand is why." The doctor's eyes darted to the closed door, then back to Nathan. "Elaine is my wife's cousin. Margaret, her mother, helped finance my practice when the bank wouldn't approve the loan. I owe them." "You owe a 5-year-old boy safety and protection," Nathan countered, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you know about Sarah's accident, too?" Reynolds flinched visibly. "What do you mean?" "I'm starting to think it wasn't an accident at all. The timing is too convenient. My wife dies, and within a year I'm married to a woman whose family has you in their pocket." "I had nothing to do with that," Reynolds protested, sweat beading on his forehead. "But you know something," Nathan pressed. "Tell me, or I'm walking straight to the medical board with these photos and a formal complaint." After a moment of tense silence, Reynolds slumped in his chair. "Margaret approached me about 6 months after Sarah died, asked questions about your insurance policy, your finances. I thought she was just looking out for a potential match for her daughter. Later, I overheard her tell Elaine that you were the perfect solution to their problems." The pieces were aligning into a horrifying picture. Nathan gathered the photographs and stood. "I'm getting my son's complete medical records. Today. And if you warn Elaine or anyone else about this conversation, I'll make sure you never practice medicine again." Outside in the parking lot, Nathan called the one person he knew could help navigate the complex legal waters ahead. Marcus Wallace had served with Nathan in Afghanistan before leaving the military to become a detective. They'd saved each other's lives more than once. "I need your help," Nathan said when Marcus answered. "It's about Ethan. I think he's being abused, and I think my wife may have been involved in Sarah's death." There was a brief silence before Marcus responded. "Jesus, Nate, that's... Where are you now?" "Leaving Reynolds' office. I have some evidence, but I need more. And I need to make sure Ethan is safe while I get it. Meet me at Franklin Park in 30. The gazebo by the duck pond. Don't go home yet." The park was quiet on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus was waiting, still in his department suit, looking exactly as he had in Nathan's wedding. Both weddings, in fact. The thought now made Nathan's stomach turn. Marcus listened without interruption as Nathan laid out everything. The bruises, Martha's documentation, Reynolds' confession, the strange comments about investment. "You need surveillance," Marcus said finally. Audio and video, I can help with that. But Nate, if what you're suggesting is true, if these people orchestrated Sarah's death to set you up, they're dangerous. You can't let on that you suspect anything. I can't just leave my son there while we gather evidence, Nathan argued. You didn't see his face, Marcus. He's terrified. Marcus leaned forward. I know a judge who can issue an emergency custody order based on what you already have. But it's temporary, maybe 72 hours. If we don't have solid evidence by then, Ethan goes back, and they'll know you're on to them. 3 days, Nathan echoed. It seemed both an eternity and not nearly enough time. Meanwhile, I'll reopen the investigation into Sarah's accident, Marcus continued. There was something off about it at the time, but without evidence of foul play, it was ruled accidental. Nathan's phone vibrated with a text from Elaine. Where are you? Thought you'd be home by now. Ethan asking for you. Marcus read the message over Nathan's shoulder. Be careful, Nate. Play the game a little longer, for Ethan's sake. That evening, Nathan returned home with recording devices disguised as ordinary objects. A phone charger with a hidden camera, a modified toy soldier with audio capabilities, a wristwatch that could record conversations, all courtesy of Marcus's connections in the surveillance unit. Ethan was subdued at dinner, pushing food around his plate while Ricky dominated the conversation with stories of his online gaming successes. Nathan noticed how his son flinched whenever Ricky moved suddenly, how Elaine constantly corrected Ethan's table manners with pinches disguised as adjustments. After dinner, Nathan insisted on bath time duty, a routine he'd always handled before deployment. Elaine protested briefly before relenting with obvious reluctance. Alone with Ethan in the steamy bathroom, Nathan carefully documented more bruises while pretending to engage in their old submarine game. The evidence made his heart ache and his combat instincts surge with protective fury. Buddy, he whispered as he helped Ethan into pajamas, I've got something special for you. He pressed the modified toy soldier into his son's hand. This is Captain Brave. He's magic. He remembers everything he hears and tells me later. Keep him with you, okay? Ethan clutched the toy, his eyes widening slightly in understanding beyond his years. That night, after Elaine fell asleep, Nathan crept into his home office, now Ricky's bedroom, though the younger man was out for the evening. He searched methodically, careful to leave everything exactly as he found it. In the desk drawer, beneath gaming magazines, he discovered something unexpected. A half-written letter in Ricky's handwriting. Can't do this anymore. The kid doesn't deserve it. I know what we agreed, but this is too far. Mom's plan is insane, and Elaine is getting worse. The insurance money isn't worth... The letter ended abruptly, as if Ricky had been interrupted while writing it. Nathan photographed it carefully before replacing it exactly as he'd found it. Later, in the guest room where he now apparently slept, Nathan reviewed the first audio recordings from Ethan's toy soldier. The sounds chilled him to the bone. Elaine's sweet voice transforming into vicious whispers when she thought they were alone. Ricky's taunts about monsters under the bed, and most disturbing of all, his son's resigned silence in the face of it all. Just before midnight, his phone lit up with a text from Marcus. Found something. Sarah's brake lines were tampered with. Not visible in initial investigation, but lab report buried in file shows trace evidence. Case reopened as of tonight. Nathan stared at the ceiling, a terrible certainty settling over him. His first wife's death was no accident, and the people responsible were sleeping under the same roof as his son. Dawn broke with the sound of Ethan's whispered, "Daddy?" Nathan opened his eyes to find his son standing beside the guest bed, Captain Brave clutched tightly in one small hand. Without a word, Nathan lifted the covers and Ethan climbed in, his tiny body curling against his father's chest like he used to before Nathan's deployment. "Uncle Ricky came into my room last night," Ethan whispered. "He was looking for Captain Brave." Nathan's arms tightened protectively around his son. "Did he find him?" Ethan shook his head. "I hid him in my special place, the one Mom doesn't know about." For the next hour, as the house remained quiet, Ethan slowly revealed more details about his special place. A loose floorboard beneath his bed where he'd hidden small treasures, a photo of Sarah, a seashell from their last family vacation, and most disturbingly, a small notebook filled with childish documentation of his own abuse. Dates, crude drawings, and words like bad day and closet time scrawled in uneven letters. "I remembered how you write in your mission book," Ethan explained solemnly. "So I made my own." Nathan swallowed hard, devastated by his son's attempt to cope using the methods he'd observed in his father. "You're very brave, buddy. Can I see this notebook today?" When Elaine knocked on the guest room door an hour later, Nathan was alone, his face composed into the mask of a contented husband. "You two are up early?" she commented, leaning against the doorframe in an expensive silk robe. "I heard voices." "Just catching up with my boy," Nathan replied smoothly. "I've missed so much." "Well, breakfast is ready. I've made your favorite, blueberry pancakes." The gesture would have seemed thoughtful 3 days ago. Now it felt calculated, another performance in a twisted play. At breakfast, Ricky appeared bleary-eyed and irritable. "Kid was making noise again last night," he complained, reaching for coffee, talking to himself. "Ethan has an active imagination," Nathan said, watching Ricky carefully. "Maybe he's working through some things." Ricky's eyes narrowed slightly. "Like what?" "Like his father being gone for 3 months," Nathan replied evenly. "Or his mother dying 2 years ago. Trauma leaves marks, doesn't it?" The table fell silent. Elaine cleared her throat. "Speaking of marks, Ethan, show Daddy how well your bruises from the playground are healing." It was a test. Nathan realized it immediately. Elaine was probing to see if Ethan had told him about the abuse, if Nathan had noticed the injuries. "I've already seen them," Nathan said casually. "During bath time last night. Kids bounce back quickly, don't they? Unlike adults." He held Elaine's gaze until she looked away, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her perfect features. After dropping Ethan at school with a whispered reminder to keep Captain Brave close, Nathan drove to the police station to meet Marcus. The detective was waiting in a small conference room, face grim above a spread of files. "We've got something," Marcus said without preamble. "The lab found microscopic metal shavings consistent with a brake line being cut, not worn through. And I pulled Elaine's financials from before your marriage." He pushed a document across the table. "She was drowning in debt, almost $200,000. Then suddenly 2 months after you two got married, she's debt-free and buying designer clothes." "My military benefits wouldn't cover that," Nathan said, scanning the numbers. "No, but your life insurance would. Same policy type as Sarah had, $500,000, double for accidental death in the line of duty. You changed your beneficiary to Elaine before deployment, right?" Nathan nodded slowly, the horrifying picture becoming clearer. "Standard procedure for married service members." "There's more," Marcus continued, opening another file. "I found a connection between Margaret Wilson and the mechanic who inspected Sarah's car the week before her accident. They went to high school together, stayed in touch. He's got priors for fraud." "She orchestrated both of them," Nathan said, the realization hitting him like physical blow. "Sarah's death and my marriage to Elaine. Looks that way, but proving it is another matter. We need more than circumstantial evidence." Nathan's phone buzzed with a notification. The hidden camera in Ethan's room had detected movement. He opened the secure app to see Elaine methodically searching under the bed, behind books, in toy boxes. "She's looking for something," Nathan muttered. "Maybe Captain Brave." Marcus glanced at the feed. "The recording devices are working, then. Good. Keep them rolling. We need solid evidence of abuse for the emergency custody hearing tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Nathan's head snapped up. That's fast. Judge Carlton owed me a favor. But Nate, you should know, Margaret Wilson has connections in this town. The kind that make cases disappear, evidence get lost. We need to be airtight. Nathan left the station with a heavy heart and a clear mission. Gather irrefutable evidence, protect Ethan, and expose the conspiracy that had claimed Sarah's life and threatened his son's. His next stop was Oak Ridge Elementary, where Bethany Taylor had agreed to meet during her lunch break. The teacher had assembled a disturbing timeline of changes in Ethan's behavior and appearance. It started small, she explained, pushing a folder across the table. Withdrawal from friends, falling asleep in class. Then the drawings changed. She laid out a progression of Ethan's artwork. Early pictures showed typical 5-year-old scenes, family figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Later, images became darker. Black scribbles over small figures, houses with bars on the windows, a childlike figure inside what appeared to be a box or closet. The most concerning part was his explanation, Bethany continued. When I asked about this one, she pointed to a dark figure looming over a small one. He said, "That's the monster that comes when I'm bad." When I asked if the monster had a name, he whispered, "Uncle Ricky," so quietly I almost missed it. "Did you report this?" Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. Bethany's face flushed with shame and anger. 3 times. First to the principal, who reminded me that the Wilsons are major donors to the school, then to Child Protective Services, who said without physical evidence they couldn't intervene in a respected military family. Finally to Dr. Reynolds, who diagnosed Ethan with an overactive imagination and suggested less screen time. The systematic failure of every institution meant to protect his son made Nathan's blood boil. I need copies of these drawings for the custody hearing. Already done, Bethany replied, sliding a sealed envelope toward him. And Nathan? I've tendered my resignation effective end of semester. I can't work in a system that prioritizes donations over children's safety. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. As Nathan left the school, his phone rang with an unknown number. Is this Nathan Miller? A young male voice, tentative. Who's asking? It's Ricky, Richard Chambers. We need to talk, not at the house. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in 20 minutes? Come alone. Every instinct told Nathan it could be a trap, but the urgency in Ricky's voice seemed genuine. He texted Marcus the details before heading to the meeting point. Ricky was waiting on a bench overlooking the river, nervously shredding a paper coffee cup. He looked younger in daylight, barely out of his teens, with dark circles under his eyes. "I've found your recording devices," Ricky said without preamble. "The one in the toy and the camera in the charger." Nathan tensed, ready for confrontation, but Ricky's next words caught him off guard. "I didn't remove them. I need you to have evidence." "Evidence of what?" Nathan asked carefully. "Everything. What they've been doing to Ethan. What Mom's planning for you." Ricky ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't sign up for this. I thought it was just about the money." "What money?" "Your insurance policy. Mom found out about it when you got married to Elaine. $500,000, double if you die in combat. She's been planning something for your deployment." "That's why I moved in, to establish presence in the house so suspicion wouldn't fall on Elaine when—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "When I died overseas," Nathan completed flatly. "Just like Sarah died in an accident." Ricky's head snapped up. "You know about that?" "I'm starting to piece it together. Your mother orchestrated my wife's death, pushed Elaine into my life, and now planned to collect on my policy too. Meanwhile, you've all been abusing my son." "Not me," Ricky protested weakly. "I mean, the monster game was Elaine's idea. I just played along. I never hurt him physically." "Psychological abuse is still abuse," Nathan said, his voice hard. "But I think you know that, or you wouldn't be here." Ricky's shoulders slumped. "I found Ethan's notebook last week. The things he wrote, the way he drew himself so small. It reminded me of my own journals at his age. Mom did the same to us. Elaine got the worst of it. I think that's why she's repeating the pattern with Ethan." "You're saying that excuses it?" "No," Ricky said quickly. "Nothing excuses it. I'm saying I want out. I'll testify about Mom's plan, about what's been happening to Ethan. Just—" he looked up, eyes pleading. "Just help me get away from her too." Nathan studied the young man, weighing sincerity against potential deception. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I've been recording them too," Ricky replied, pulling out a small USB drive. "Every conversation about the investment, about making your death look accidental, about breaking Ethan so he wouldn't tell anyone what was happening. It's all here." Nathan accepted the drive cautiously. "If you're playing me—" "I'm not," Ricky interrupted. "Check the drive. If I'm lying, turn me in with the rest of them. But if I'm telling the truth, I want immunity. And protection from my mother." As Nathan drove away from the park, the USB drive secure in his pocket, his phone rang again. This time it was Ethan's school. "Mr. Miller, this is Principal Hoffman. There's been an incident with Ethan. He became extremely distressed during recess and is refusing to speak to anyone except you. We need you to come right away." Nathan broke every speed limit getting to the school. He found Ethan curled in a ball in the nurse's office, trembling violently. "Buddy?" Nathan knelt beside him. "What happened?" Ethan looked up, his face streaked with tears. "Grandma Margaret came to the fence during recess. She said you're going away forever like Mommy did. She said if I tell anyone about the monster game, they'll take me away and put me in a dark place where no one will find me." A cold fury unlike anything Nathan had ever experienced washed over him. "Did anyone else see her?" The school nurse stepped forward. "I did. I was on recess duty and noticed an older woman talking to Ethan through the fence. By the time I approached, she was walking away. He was like this when I reached him." Principal Hoffman cleared his throat from the doorway. "We've reviewed the security footage. It clearly shows Margaret Wilson speaking to Ethan, though we can't hear what was said. In light of this inappropriate contact, I've authorized release of all records. Ms. Taylor flagged regarding Ethan's behavioral changes." The principal's sudden cooperation felt like too little, too late, but Nathan accepted the thick folder without comment. "I'm taking my son home now." "Of course," Hoffman agreed quickly. "And Mr. Miller? The school will fully cooperate with any investigation." In the car, Ethan clutched Captain Brave, his eyes darting nervously. "Are we going home?" "No, buddy. We're going somewhere safe." Nathan drove directly to Marcus's house, a small bungalow on the outskirts of town where the detective lived alone. Marcus was waiting on the porch, face grim. "Got your text about the school incident," he said as they approached. "Judge Carlton issued the emergency custody order 10 minutes ago. Ethan stays with you, away from Elaine and her family, pending tomorrow's hearing." Inside, while Ethan napped in Marcus's spare bedroom, exhausted from his ordeal, the two men reviewed the contents of Ricky's USB drive. The recordings were damning. Clear discussions between Margaret and Elaine about the military investment and how to ensure Nathan wouldn't return from deployment, interspersed with explicit instructions on how to handle Ethan if he became suspicious. "This is enough to arrest them for conspiracy," Marcus said, rubbing his face. "Combined with the evidence of abuse and the new investigation into Sarah's death, we can put them away for a long time." "Then let's do it," Nathan urged. "Now, before they realize Ethan and I aren't coming home." Marcus shook his head. "We need to do this by the book, Nate. One legal misstep and they could walk. The DA is preparing warrants as we speak. By morning, we'll have everything in place." Nathan paced the small living room, every fiber of his being demanding immediate action. "And if they run? We've got eyes on the house already," Marcus assured him. "Unmarked car down the street. They're not going anywhere." That night, as Ethan slept peacefully for the first time since Nathan's return, the soldier sat beside his son's bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. His phone buzzed with texts from Elaine, increasingly frantic messages asking where they were, demanding they come home. He didn't reply. There would be time for confrontation tomorrow. Instead, he opened the recording app one last time, listening to Captain Brave's final audio file, captured just before they left for school that morning. Elaine's voice, sweet as honey as she helped Ethan brush his teeth, followed by her whispered threat when she thought they were alone. "Remember our secret, Ethan. If you tell Daddy about our games, the monsters won't just come for you. They'll take him away forever, just like they took your real mommy." In the darkness of Marcus's spare bedroom, Nathan made a solemn vow to his sleeping son. Those who had brought monsters into his child's life would soon discover they had awakened something far more dangerous. A father with nothing left to lose. The courthouse stood like a granite sentinel in the morning light, its steps already crowded with reporters who had caught wind of the sensational case. Nathan carried Ethan up those steps, the boy's face buried against his neck to shield him from flashing cameras and shouted questions. "Is it true your wife abused your son? Captain Miller, did your mother-in-law orchestrate your first wife's death? Were you the target of a murder plot?" Marcus flanked them on one side, a uniformed officer on the other, creating a protective corridor through the media gauntlet. Inside, the relative quiet of the courthouse felt like a reprieve, though Nathan's combat instincts remained on high alert. Somewhere in this building, Elaine and her family would be fighting to regain control of their carefully constructed narrative, and of Ethan. "You okay, buddy?" Nathan whispered as they settled into a private waiting room. Ethan nodded, though his grip on Captain Brave hadn't loosened. The toy soldier, now emptied of its recording device, had become a talisman of safety for the boy. "Remember what we practiced?" Nathan asked gently. "You only have to answer questions from the judge. You don't have to talk to anyone else if you don't want to." "Not even Mom?" Ethan asked, his voice small. Nathan's heart twisted at the question. How did you explain to a 5-year-old that the woman he called Mom had participated in his abuse, had possibly been involved in his real mother's death, had planned his father's murder? "Not even her," Nathan confirmed. "Not today." The door opened and a woman in her 50s entered, her expression kind but professional. "Captain Miller, I'm Susan Winters, the guardian ad litem appointed for Ethan. I'll be representing his interests today." Nathan had been briefed to expect this. An independent advocate assigned to ensure Ethan's well-being remained the court's priority. Still, surrendering even this small bit of control over his son's fate was difficult. "Ms. Winters will take Ethan to meet Judge Carlton privately," Marcus explained. "It's standard procedure in these cases. Lets the child speak freely without pressure from either parent." Nathan knelt to Ethan's level. "Miss Winters is going to take you to talk to the judge. I'll be right here waiting when you're done. Captain Brave can go with you." Ethan studied the guardian's face with the wary assessment of a child who had learned to read adult intentions as a survival skill. Finally he nodded and took Ms. Winters' outstretched hand. As they left, Marcus squeezed Nathan's shoulder. "He'll be okay. Carlton is good with kids, former family court judge before moving to criminal court." The next hour was the longest of Nathan's life. Worse than waiting for extraction under enemy fire, worse than the night he'd received news of Sarah's accident. His son was somewhere in this building, being asked to recount traumas no child should experience, while Nathan could do nothing but wait. The door opened again, revealing the district attorney, Patricia Hammond, a formidable woman with 3 decades of prosecutorial experience. "Captain Miller," she acknowledged, taking a seat across from them. "I've reviewed all the evidence, including the recordings from both your devices and Richard Chambers' USB drive. We have more than enough for the emergency custody extension and for criminal charges." "All 3 of them?" Nathan asked. "Elaine Miller, Margaret Wilson, and conditionally, Richard Chambers," Hammond confirmed. "Though based on his cooperation and the evidence suggesting his own history of victimization, we're offering Chambers a plea deal in exchange for testimony." Nathan nodded, unsurprised. Ricky's assistance had been crucial, even if part of him wanted everyone involved to pay the full price for what Ethan had endured. "There's a complication, however," Hammond continued, her expression grave. "Margaret Wilson has considerable influence in this community. Her attorney is already working to paint this as a vindictive custody battle. A returning soldier with PTSD making false accusations because his new wife disciplined his child while he was away." "The evidence," Nathan began, "is substantial," Hammond finished. "But Wilson has already moved to suppress the recordings, claiming invasion of privacy. It won't work, but it could delay proceedings, and delay works in their favor." "How?" Marcus asked. "Your military leave ends in 3 days, Captain Miller," Hammond pointed out. "They're hoping to drag this out until you're required to return to duty. Without you here to maintain custody, they could petition for temporary guardianship while the case proceeds." The realization hit Nathan like a physical blow. His commanding officer had been clear. This training rotation was mandatory for his upcoming deployment. An extension might be possible under these circumstances, but not guaranteed. "What do we need to make this stick?" Nathan asked, military precision in his voice. "To ensure Ethan's safety regardless of my duty status?" "Testimony," Hammond replied simply. "Yours, the teacher's, Martha Sullivan's, and, ideally, Ethan's. The recordings are powerful, but nothing impacts a judge like hearing directly from the victims and witnesses." A soft knock at the door preceded Miss Winter's return, without Ethan. "Judge Carlton is still speaking with your son," she explained, taking a seat. "I've been asked to update you." Ethan was initially reluctant to speak, but once he felt safe, he became quite detailed about what he called the monster game and closet time. "The judge has requested Doc. Lydia Hoffman, a child psychologist, to join them." "Is that normal?" Nathan asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. "In cases of suspected severe psychological abuse, yes," Winters confirmed. "Dr. Hoffman specializes in childhood trauma. Her presence will strengthen the case significantly." The door opened again and a court officer leaned in. "They're ready for you in courtroom C. The judge will hear statements before making her determination." The courtroom was smaller than Nathan had expected, the atmosphere tense with suppressed emotion. On one side sat Elaine, her perfect composure showing cracks around the edges, her designer outfit incongruous with the setting. Beside her, Margaret Wilson, silver-haired, elegant, her face a mask of indignation. Their attorney, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, whispered urgently between them. Ricky sat alone at a separate table with his public defender, his shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. On the prosecution side, Hammond gestured Nathan to join her at the table. Marcus took a seat directly behind them, along with Bethany Taylor and Martha Sullivan, who had insisted on attending despite her doctor's recommendation to rest. Judge Carlton entered, a tall woman with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate and categorize everyone in her courtroom. "This is an emergency hearing regarding temporary custody of minor child Ethan Miller, age 5, and related criminal complaints. This is not a trial. I will hear brief statements before making my determination regarding immediate custody and whether to proceed with criminal charges." Her gaze swept the room. I have already spoken at length with the child in question and reviewed substantial evidence provided by both the district attorney's office and the child's guardian ad litem. I will now hear from the parties involved, beginning with Captain Miller. Nathan stood, his military bearing automatic under pressure. Your Honor, I returned from a 3-month training deployment to find my son physically and emotionally abused. He had been systematically terrorized through what his stepmother and her brother called the monster game, being locked in closets, threatened, pinched, pushed, and manipulated into silence through fear. His voice remained steady, though his hands clenched at his sides. During my investigation, I discovered evidence suggesting this abuse was part of a larger conspiracy, one that may have begun with my first wife's death, continued with my manipulated marriage to Elaine Wilson, and was intended to culminate with my own accidental death during deployment. The financial motive appears to be life insurance policies. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Carlton tapped her gavel once. Ms. Miller, your response? Elaine rose, a calculated tremble in her perfectly manicured hands. Your Honor, my husband returned from deployment displaying signs of paranoia and aggression. He immediately began making these outlandish accusations, frightening Ethan with talk of monsters and conspiracies. The recording devices he planted in our home were installed without consent, making any evidence obtained from them inadmissible. She dabbed at dry eyes with a handkerchief. As for Ethan's injuries, children play, they fall. My brother Ricky has been helping care for Ethan while Nathan was away, providing male influence and stability. These accusations are not only false, but damaging to a child already struggling with his father's prolonged absences. Judge Carlton's expression revealed nothing. Ms. Wilson? Margaret stood, the picture of affronted dignity. Your Honor, these accusations against my daughter and myself are absurd. Captain Miller is clearly suffering from the psychological effects of his military service, combined with unresolved grief over his first wife's tragic accident. Rather than accepting help, he has constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory and manipulated his vulnerable young son into supporting it. The judge made a note, then looked at Ricky. Mr. Chambers? Ricky stood slowly, his face pale. Your Honor, He glanced at his mother and sister, then took a deep breath. The accusations are true. My mother orchestrated Sarah Miller's death by arranging for her brake lines to be tampered with. She then positioned Elaine to meet and marry Captain Miller, with the intention of eventually collecting on his life insurance policy as well. Margaret's outraged, "How dare you!" rang through the courtroom as her attorney tried to silence her. As for Ethan, Ricky continued, his voice strengthening, he was subjected to systematic psychological abuse primarily by Elaine under our mother's direction. The monster game was designed to ensure his compliance and silence. I participated to a lesser extent, but witnessed most of it. I've provided recordings of conversations between my mother and sister, discussing both the abuse and their plans for Captain Miller. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Margaret's voice rose above the others. He's lying. Ricky has always been mentally unstable, jealous of his sister's success. Judge Carlton's gavel came down repeatedly. Order! The next person who speaks out of turn will be removed from my courtroom. When silence fell, the judge turned to Hammond. Does the prosecution have witnesses present? Yes, Your Honor. Bethany Taylor, Ethan's kindergarten teacher, Dr. James Reynolds, the family pediatrician, Martha Sullivan, neighbor and witness, and Detective Marcus Wallace, who investigated both the current abuse allegations and the reopened case of Sarah Miller's death. Judge Carlton nodded. I've reviewed their written statements and the evidence files. I see no need to subject them to questioning in open court at this time, though they will be required for the criminal proceedings. She shuffled the papers before her, then looked up, her expression grave. Having spoken at length with Ethan Miller and reviewed all evidence presented, I find there is more than sufficient cause for concern regarding his safety and well-being in the care of Elaine Miller and any member of the Wilson family." Elaine's mask of composure cracked completely, her face contorting with rage. "You can't do this. That child belongs with me. Nathan is never even home. He chooses the military over his own son." "Remove Ms. Miller from the courtroom," Judge Carlton ordered, and 2 officers immediately moved to escort the now screaming woman out. "This isn't over, Nathan!" Elaine shrieked as she was led away. "You think you can protect him? You couldn't even protect Sarah." The judge waited for the doors to close before continuing. "Temporary sole custody of Ethan Miller is granted to his father, Nathan Miller, effective immediately and continuing throughout criminal proceedings. Additionally, I am issuing a restraining order preventing Elaine Miller, Margaret Wilson, and Richard Chambers from coming within 500 feet of Ethan Miller or any location he regularly attends, including his school and home." She turned to the prosecution table. "Ms. Hammond, based on the evidence presented, I am authorizing arrest warrants for Elaine Miller and Margaret Wilson on charges of child abuse, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Mr. Chambers' cooperation will be taken into consideration per your office's recommendation." Margaret Wilson stood, her aristocratic features twisted with fury. "This is an outrage. Do you have any idea who I am in this community? This will never stand." "Ms. Wilson," Judge Carlton replied coldly, "your standing in this community is precisely what allowed this abuse to continue unchecked for so long. Officers, please take her into custody." As Margaret was led from the courtroom, still protesting her innocence and threatening retribution, Nathan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, only to be replaced immediately by a new concern. "Your Honor," he said, rising again, "my military leave ends in 3 days. While I intend to request an extension under these circumstances, I need to ensure Ethan's safety and custody arrangement regardless of the outcome." Judge Carlton's expression softened slightly. "Captain Miller, I understand your dilemma. This court recognizes your military service as essential, not as abandonment of your parental duties. Should you be required to return to duty, we will establish a guardianship arrangement with individuals of your choosing, maintaining your legal custody while providing Ethan with stable care during your absence." She glanced at her notes. "I see Mrs. Sullivan has already volunteered in this capacity, with backup support from your sister in Colorado if needed. Would this arrangement be acceptable to you?" Nathan glanced back at Martha, who gave him a firm nod. The elderly woman had become Ethan's fiercest advocate outside of Nathan himself. "Yes, Your Honor. Thank you." As the hearing concluded, Hammond approached Nathan with a grim smile. "That went as well as we could have hoped. The criminal case will take longer, but Ethan is safe now. That's what matters most." Nathan nodded, his mind already moving to his son. "Where is Ethan now?" "With Dr. Hoffman in the Child Advocacy Room," Hammond replied. "You can take him home whenever you're ready." The Child Advocacy Room turned out to be a cheerful space with bright murals, comfortable furniture, and toys designed to help traumatized children feel safe. Ethan sat at a small table with Dr. Hoffman, drawing intently on a large sheet of paper. When Nathan entered, Ethan looked up, his expression cautious until he recognized his father. Then he launched himself across the room and into Nathan's arms. "Did the judge believe me?" he whispered against Nathan's neck. "About the monsters?" Nathan held his son tight, feeling the small heart beating against his chest. "Yes, buddy. She believed everything. The monsters can't hurt you anymore." Dr. Hoffman approached quietly, holding Ethan's drawing. "Ethan and I had a good talk," she said, her voice gentle. "He's a remarkably resilient young man." "We'd like to continue our sessions twice weekly, if that works for you." Nathan nodded, still holding Ethan close. "Whatever he needs." She handed him the drawing, a house with a smiling sun above it and two figures holding hands in front. No closets, no monsters, no darkness. Just a father and son standing together beneath an open sky. "Daddy?" Ethan asked as they walked toward the courthouse exit, where Marcus waited to drive them home. "Are you going away again?" The question stabbed at Nathan's heart. The impossible choice between duty to country and duty to his son, made more complex by the trauma Ethan had endured. "I don't know yet, buddy," he answered honestly. "I'm trying to stay longer. But if I have to go away for a little while, Martha will take care of you, and I'll talk to you every single day. And I promise—" He stopped, kneeling to look Ethan in the eye. "I promise I will always come back to you." Ethan studied his father's face with that too-old gaze that broke Nathan's heart. Then slowly he nodded. "I believe you. Captain Brave said you never break promises." As they stepped into the sunshine, cameras flashed and reporters called out questions. Nathan shielded Ethan's face against his shoulder and kept walking, Marcus clearing a path before them. One voice rose above the others, Margaret Wilson's attorney, making a statement to the assembled media. "This is a travesty of justice against a respected family. These allegations are completely unfounded, the product of a military father's PTSD and custody jealousy. We will appeal this decision and clear my clients' names." Nathan ignored the words, focusing only on the precious weight in his arms. The legal battle wasn't over, might not be for months or years, but the most important victory had already been won. His son was safe. The rest they would face together, one day at a time. That evening, in the small rental house Marcus had helped them secure, away from the memories and surveillance of their old home, Nathan tucked Ethan into bed in a room filled with nightlights. "Daddy?" Ethan murmured, already half asleep. "Is Mommy Sarah watching over us from heaven?" Nathan swallowed hard, unprepared for the question. "I think she is, buddy. I think she helped me find out about the monsters so I could keep you safe." Ethan nodded, his eyes drifting closed. "That's what I thought, too. I used to talk to her picture when I was in the closet. She said you'd come home and fix everything." As his son's breathing deepened into sleep, Nathan remained seated on the edge of the bed, tears silently tracking down his face. In the quiet darkness, he made two silent vows: to Sarah that justice would finally be served for her death, and to Ethan that the monsters, both real and imagined, would never touch him again. The weeks following the custody hearing unfolded in a blur of contradictions for Nathan. There were moments of profound hope. Ethan's first genuine laugh while playing at the park, the night he slept through without nightmares, the morning he asked for pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, as if he were just a normal 5-year-old boy. These moments sustained Nathan through the darker hours, the legal meetings that seemed endless, the media attention that refused to fade, and most devastating of all, Ethan's therapy sessions that revealed the full extent of his trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder in children manifests differently than in adults, Dr. Hoffman explained during one of their private consultations, while Ethan played with toys in the next room under a therapy assistant's supervision. Ethan's hypervigilance, his difficulty sleeping, his tendency to freeze when startled, these are all normal responses to the abnormal situation he endured. Nathan nodded, the symptoms all too familiar from his own combat experiences. "How do we help him move past it?" "We don't rush moving past trauma," Dr. Hoffman corrected gently. "We learn to process it, integrate it, and eventually it becomes a part of his story rather than the whole story. Children are remarkably resilient when they have consistent support." Consistent support. The phrase echoed in Nathan's mind as he faced his commanding officer via video call later that week. Colonel Bennett's face was sympathetic but resolute on the screen. I've reviewed your request for compassionate reassignment, Miller. Given the circumstances, I can delay your return to the training rotation for 30 days. Beyond that, he sighed, you're one of our best. The unit needs you for the Khalidi deployment. My son needs me more, sir, Nathan replied, military discipline warring with parental instinct. I understand that, but you made commitments to your country, too. Bennett leaned closer to the camera. Here's what I can offer. Compassionate reassignment to Fort Carson. You'd be a training officer, regular hours, minimal travel. It's not a combat role, and your special forces experience would be invaluable to the new recruits. It wasn't ideal. Fort Carson was in Colorado, meaning a move across the country for Ethan just as he was finding stability, but it was far better than deployment to the Middle East. I'd need time to arrange the transition, sir. Ethan's in therapy. There are ongoing court proceedings. 60 days, Bennett offered. But that's my final offer, Miller. After that, it's either Fort Carson or your original deployment schedule. When Nathan explained the situation to Martha that evening, the elderly woman nodded thoughtfully, her gnarled hands wrapping around her teacup. Colorado has mountains, clean air. Might be good for the boy, she mused. And your sister's there, you said? Kate's in Denver, Nathan confirmed. About an hour from the base. She's already offered to help with Ethan if I get assigned there. Martha smiled sadly. I'll miss the little fella something fierce, but what matters is keeping him with you. That boy's had enough separation to last a lifetime. The trial preparations continued relentlessly. Margaret Wilson had hired the most aggressive defense attorney in the state, a man known for destroying witnesses' credibility and manipulating media narratives. Already, sympathetic articles had appeared suggesting Nathan was an unstable veteran using false accusations to maintain control of his son while portraying Elaine as a devoted stepmother being persecuted for trying to discipline an unruly child. They're claiming the recordings were selectively edited, Hammond explained during one strategy session, frustration evident in her voice. And they've filed motions to exclude Martha's testimony on grounds of her age and cognitive reliability. Martha's sharper than most people half her age, Nathan protested. You and I know that, but all they need to do is plant doubt. The Wilson family has deep roots here. Margaret's father was a judge, her grandfather was mayor. There are people in this town who'll believe her no matter what evidence we present. The most disturbing development came 3 weeks after the custody hearing. Nathan was helping Ethan with a puzzle when his phone rang. Marcus, his voice tight with controlled anger. Nate, you need to see something. I'm texting you a link now. The link led to a glossy website titled Truth for Ethan, featuring professional photographs of Elaine looking solemn and maternal. The site included carefully edited home videos showing idyllic family moments, Elaine helping Ethan with homework, playing board games, tucking him in at night. A tearful video statement claimed she was being persecuted for loving a troubled child and that Nathan's military-induced paranoia had manufactured a conspiracy where none existed. Most disturbing of all, the site included a donation button to help fund Elaine's legal defense, which had already collected over $50,000 from sympathetic strangers. She's weaponizing social media, Marcus explained grimly, creating reasonable doubt in the court of public opinion. And it's working. She's been invited to appear on 3 morning shows next week. Nathan felt physically ill looking at the artificial portrayal of the woman who had terrorized his son. Can't we shut this down? Free speech, unfortunately. Hammond's filing for a gag order, but until then, we need to prepare for the publicity battle as well as the legal one. The media onslaught took its toll. Reporters camped outside their rental home, forcing Nathan to install blackout curtains so Ethan wouldn't see the cameras. Strangers approached them in grocery stores, some offering support, others accusing Nathan of fabricating allegations against that poor woman. Martha received threatening phone calls late at night from anonymous Wilson supporters. Ethan, already traumatized, began regressing, wetting the bed, refusing to attend school, clinging to Nathan's side with desperate intensity. "They're saying I told lies," he whispered one night after Nathan found him hiding in his closet, a heartbreaking return to the behavior he'd exhibited during the abuse. "The lady on TV said I made up stories because I'm bad." "You're not bad," Nathan assured him fiercely, gathering his son into his arms. "And you didn't lie. The people who hurt you are trying to protect themselves, that's all." But the damage was done. Dr. Hoffman recommended temporarily removing Ethan from school after several parents, influenced by the media campaign, complained about their children being exposed to a troubled child from a dysfunctional home. The school should be protecting Ethan, not ostracizing him, Nathan argued to Principal Hoffman, who had the grace to look ashamed. "I agree completely, Captain Miller, but I have 22 other families threatening to withdraw their children if Ethan remains in class. Many of them attend Margaret Wilson's church and believe her version of events." The isolation compounded their challenges. Nathan arranged for a private tutor, but Ethan's social development suffered without peer interaction. The boy who had once been outgoing and friendly became withdrawn, speaking only to Nathan, Martha, and occasionally Dr. Hoffman. The most devastating blow came 6 weeks after the initial hearing. Nathan was preparing dinner when Marcus arrived unannounced, his expression grave. "Hammond sent me," he said without preamble. "The DA's office received new evidence today. Someone anonymously delivered medical records showing you sought treatment for PTSD and anger management issues after your last deployment." Nathan frowned. "Those records are confidential. And yes, I voluntarily sought counseling after Afghanistan. Most of my unit did." "What does that have to do with Ethan's case?" "They're arguing it establishes a pattern of mental instability and paranoia," Marcus explained, his disgust evident. "Worse, they've somehow obtained security footage from the base showing you in an altercation with another soldier during training. Reynolds pulled me aside after a simulation, suggested I wasn't fit for command because I was distracted by Ethan. I shoved him once. We sorted it out 5 minutes later." Nathan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "How is this relevant?" "They're building a narrative that you're unstable, prone to violence, and imagining conspiracies due to PTSD. If they can convince the court you're an unreliable witness, everything else starts to unravel." The implications hit Nathan like physical blows. His military service, the career he'd built, the sacrifices he'd made, was being twisted into evidence against him. The very system he'd fought to protect was now being manipulated to separate him from his son. That night, after Ethan was finally asleep, Nathan sat alone on the porch of their rental house, staring into the darkness. The weight of it all, the legal battles, the media lies, the military obligations, and most importantly, Ethan's fragile recovery, seemed suddenly insurmountable. For the first time since Sarah's death, he allowed himself to break down, silent tears tracking down his face as he struggled to find a path forward. How could he fight enemies on so many fronts at once? How could he protect Ethan when the entire system seemed rigged against them? The soft creak of the screen door interrupted his thoughts. Martha stood there, her ancient bathrobe pulled tight against the evening chill. "Thought I might find you out here," she said, lowering herself carefully into the adjacent chair. "Bad day?" Nathan wiped his face quickly. "They're using my military service against me." "Making it seem like I'm unstable, dangerous even," Martha snorted. "Bunch of vultures. Wouldn't know honor if it bit them on the behind." "What if they win, Martha?" Nathan voiced his deepest fear. "What if they convince the court I'm unfit and take Ethan away?" "Then we keep fighting," she replied simply. "You think this is the first time the rich and powerful have tried to crush the truth? I was at Selma in '65, son. I've seen worse odds than these." She reached over, her gnarled hand surprisingly strong as it gripped his. "That boy in there loves you something fierce." And he's counting on you not to give up no matter how hard they push. The next morning brought another blow. Nathan's phone rang at 5:30 a.m. Hammond, her voice tense. Elaine's attorney filed an emergency motion claiming you're planning to flee the jurisdiction with Ethan. They're requesting immediate suspension of your custody pending investigation. Nathan sat bolt upright. That's absurd. Where would they get that idea? Your military reassignment to Colorado. They're painting it as an attempt to remove Ethan from the court's jurisdiction and prevent Elaine from rebuilding their relationship. It's a standard military transfer, Nathan protested, and it's not for another month at least. I know that, but they're claiming the timing is suspicious. Judge Carlton has called an emergency hearing for 9 a.m. today to address the concern. After arranging for Martha to stay with a still sleeping Ethan, Nathan met Hammond at the courthouse. The hearing was brief but intense, with Elaine's attorney arguing passionately that Nathan's planned relocation constituted flight risk. Captain Miller has already demonstrated his willingness to take matters into his own hands, Your Honor, the attorney insisted. First with unauthorized surveillance, now with this convenient military transfer that would remove the child from his mother's life entirely. Miss Miller is not Ethan's mother, Hammond countered. She is his alleged abuser, currently awaiting trial for child endangerment and conspiracy to commit fraud. Captain Miller's transfer is standard military procedure, documented by official orders from his commanding officer. Judge Carlton seemed unmoved by the defense's arguments, but her ruling still sent a chill through Nathan. While I find no evidence of intent to flee jurisdiction, this case involves serious allegations that must be fully resolved before any permanent relocation. Therefore, I am issuing a geographical restriction. Neither Ethan Miller nor Captain Nathan Miller may leave the state until the criminal proceedings against Elaine Miller and Margaret Wilson have concluded or until further order of this court. The implications hit Nathan immediately. Without the transfer to Fort Carson, his original deployment schedule would resume in just over a month. If he deployed, Ethan would remain with Martha, safe but separated once again from his father at the moment he needed him most. If he refused deployment to stay with Ethan, he faced court-martial and dishonorable discharge, potentially losing the ability to support his son altogether. An impossible choice. We'll file for an exception, Hammond assured him as they left the courtroom. Your circumstances are extraordinary. Surely the court will recognize that. But Nathan had seen enough of the justice system's recognition to harbor serious doubts. The worst moment came that evening when he had to explain to Ethan that their planned visit to Aunt Kate in Colorado might be delayed. But you promised we'd see the mountains, Ethan said, his lower lip trembling. You said we'd go somewhere new where people don't know about the monsters. I know, buddy. I'm still trying to make that happen, but right now we need to stay here a little longer. Ethan's face crumpled in betrayal. You're breaking your promise. No, Ethan, I'm not. You said we'd go away from here. Tears spilled down his cheeks. You promised. Grown-ups always break promises. He ran to his room, slamming the door with a force that shook the small house. When Nathan tried to follow, he found the door barricaded with a chair, a defensive technique Ethan had developed during the abuse. Ethan, please. Let me explain. Go away, Ethan shouted, his voice raw with hurt. You're just like them. You lie. The accusation cut deeper than any knife. Being compared to the people who had traumatized his son was unbearable. Nathan slid down the wall beside Ethan's door, listening to his son's muffled sobs, powerless to comfort him. That night, for the first time since Nathan had brought him home, Ethan refused to say good night. He remained barricaded in his room, eventually crying himself to sleep while Nathan maintained his vigil in the hallway, unwilling to leave even when Martha gently suggested he get some rest. I can't leave him, Nathan whispered. What if he needs me? He always needs you, Martha replied softly. That's not going to change because of one bad night. But something had changed. The fragile trust Nathan had rebuilt with his son had cracked, revealing the depth of Ethan's emotional wounds. After everything they'd endured, after all the monsters they'd faced together, Nathan's inability to keep this one promise had reinforced Ethan's deepest fear, that the adults in his life would ultimately fail him. In the darkness of that hallway, listening to his son's troubled sleep, Nathan faced the brutal truth. He had survived combat zones, uncovered a murderous conspiracy, and fought against powerful enemies. But nothing had prepared him for this moment of absolute helplessness against his child's pain. Tomorrow, he would begin again. He would find a way through this impossible maze of military duty, legal obligations, and parental responsibility. He would rebuild Ethan's trust one small promise at a time. But tonight, in the quiet darkness outside his son's locked door, Captain Nathan Miller, decorated soldier, determined father, defender against monsters both real and imagined, finally confronted an enemy he couldn't defeat through strength or strategy. The broken heart of a child who had endured too much, too soon. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the geographical restriction was imposed, 3 days of Ethan's wounded silence and Nathan's mounting desperation, Ricky Chambers requested a meeting through his attorney. He says he has information that could change everything, Marcus explained, driving Nathan to the juvenile detention facility where Ricky was being held pending trial. Won't tell anyone but you. Nathan was skeptical. Despite Ricky's cooperation, he remained one of Ethan's abusers, perhaps less culpable than Elaine or Margaret, but complicit nonetheless. The meeting room was stark and institutional, with cameras monitoring from each corner. Ricky looked smaller somehow, his designer clothes replaced by detention center scrubs, his carefully styled hair now limp and unwashed. "Thank you for coming," he began, nervously fidgeting with a paper cup. "How's Ethan?" "Let's skip the pleasantries," Nathan replied coldly. "Marcus says you have information. What is it?" Ricky swallowed hard. "It's about Sarah's death, and yours, the one they planned. We already know about the brake lines and the insurance policy." "No, it's bigger than that." Ricky leaned forward. "Mom didn't just target you and Sarah randomly. She's done this before." Nathan's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "3 times that I know of. Maybe more before I was old enough to understand." Ricky's voice dropped to a whisper. "Thomas Grayson, 1996. Eleanor Winters, 2002. And Sarah, in 2019. Who are these people?" "Thomas was Mom's second husband. He died in a hunting accident, his gun mysteriously discharged while cleaning it. Eleanor was Elaine's college roommate's stepmother. Fell downstairs in her home. And then Sarah." Nathan struggled to process this information. "You're claiming your mother is a serial killer?" "Not exactly. She's more like an architect. She designs the accidents, arranges the circumstances, but keeps her hands clean. The actual work is done by others." Ricky looked down. "People she controls through money, manipulation, or blackmail. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because she's planning something for you and Ethan. Something desperate." Ricky's eyes held genuine fear. "Yesterday, my lawyer told me about the geographical restriction. Last night, Mom called me from jail. She was different, calm, in a way that scared me. She said, 'Everything will be resolved soon. The Miller problem is being handled.'" A chill ran down Nathan's spine. "What does that mean?" "I don't know exactly. But in the past, when things didn't go her way legally, accidents happened. Witnesses disappeared or changed their stories. Evidence vanished." Ricky hesitated. "There's more." In Mom's house, behind the painting in her study, there's a safe. The combination is her wedding anniversary, 10/17/85. Inside, you'll find documentation on all of it, the previous deaths, the insurance payouts, everything. She keeps records. It's like trophies. Why would she document her own crimes? Control, power. She likes having leverage over everyone involved. Ricky's hands trembled slightly. That's how she controlled Elaine and me our whole lives. Knowing too much, being implicated. We couldn't escape without incriminating ourselves. Nathan studied the young man's face, looking for deception, but finding only exhaustion and fear. Why should I believe you? Because I'm done being her puppet. Because Ethan reminds me of myself at that age, and no kid deserves what we put him through. Ricky met Nathan's gaze directly. And because I've already given my attorney a sealed affidavit with everything I know. If anything happens to me, it goes straight to the FBI. Nathan left the detention center with his mind racing. If Ricky was telling the truth, Margaret Wilson wasn't just an abusive grandmother or a greedy manipulator. She was a calculating predator with multiple victims spanning decades. Marcus was skeptical but professional. We can't just break into Margaret's house based on Ricky's word. We need a warrant, which means convincing a judge that his testimony is credible. What about Hammond? Could she expedite this? I'll call her, but these allegations are extreme. Without corroborating evidence, it's a long shot. Nathan couldn't wait for the slow machinery of justice, not with Margaret's ominous words hanging in the air. The Miller problem is being handled. He called Martha immediately. Is Ethan with you? Of course, dear. We're making peanut butter cookies. He's still quiet, but he helped measure the ingredients. Listen carefully. I need you to pack an overnight bag for both of you. Marcus is sending a patrol car to bring you to his house. Stay there until I come for you. Martha, bless her, didn't waste time with questions. We'll be ready in 10 minutes. Next, Nathan called Bethany Taylor, who had become a crucial ally in Ethan's recovery. Ms. Taylor, this is Nathan Miller. Have you had any unusual visitors or calls recently? Anyone asking about Ethan or your testimony? Actually, yes, she replied, surprise evident in her voice. A woman from the school board came by yesterday, asking detailed questions about my classroom procedures and record keeping. She implied there might be an audit of my teaching practices. Was this a scheduled visit? Someone you knew? No, that's what seemed odd. She had identification, but I'd never seen her before. When I called the district office afterward to confirm, they had no record of sending anyone. Do not go home tonight, Nathan instructed. Go somewhere unexpected. A hotel, a friend's house out of town. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Similar calls to Dr. Hoffman and Martha's neighbor, who had been helping with Ethan, revealed more disturbing patterns. Unusual encounters, subtle intimidation, strangers asking questions. Margaret Wilson, even from behind bars, was systematically targeting everyone connected to Ethan's case. Hammond called as Nathan was explaining the situation to Marcus. I've just received an anonymous package, she said without preamble. It contains what appears to be psychiatric records suggesting you were diagnosed with delusional disorder after your last deployment. That's fabricated, Nathan replied immediately. I've never had such a diagnosis. I believe you. The records look professional but contain inconsistencies. More concerning is that someone had access to enough of your actual medical information to create a convincing forgery. They're trying to discredit me before I can expose what Ricky told me, Nathan realized. Margaret Wilson has apparently killed before, at least 3 times that Ricky knows of. He claims there's evidence in a safe in her house. Hammond was silent for a moment. These are extraordinary allegations. Getting a warrant based solely on the testimony of a co-conspirator seeking leniency would be challenging under normal circumstances. And these circumstances? With Margaret Wilson's connections to half the judges in the county? Nearly impossible without corroboration. After hanging up, Nathan paced Marcus's living room, the walls closing in around him. Every legal avenue seemed blocked by Margaret's influence. Every attempt to protect Ethan through proper channels was countered by her invisible network. Even from jail, she was orchestrating a campaign to isolate and discredit them. "What would you do?" Nathan finally asked Marcus. "If it were your child at risk, and following the rules meant leaving them vulnerable?" Marcus sighed heavily. "You know I can't answer that as a detective." "Then answer as my friend, as someone who was there when we pulled those kids out of that compound in Kandahar because waiting for official authorization would have meant their deaths. This isn't Kandahar, Nate. This is civilian law. Breaking it has consequences that could separate you from Ethan permanently. And following it could get him killed." Nathan's voice broke slightly. "Margaret Wilson has murdered before. Now she's targeting everyone who could testify against her. It's only a matter of time before she finds a way to reach Ethan." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I have vacation days scheduled next week. Chief approved them months ago. I'll be completely unreachable for 72 hours, starting tomorrow morning." Their eyes met in silent understanding. No explicit acknowledgement, no details exchanged, just the tacit agreement between two soldiers who had learned that sometimes protecting the innocent required operating in the gray areas between right and wrong. That night, after ensuring Martha and Ethan were safely settled in Marcus's fortified home with a trusted officer standing guard, Nathan prepared for what might be the most important mission of his life, one with no military backing, no official sanction, and consequences that could destroy everything if he failed. The Wilson estate stood on 3 manicured acres in the most exclusive neighborhood in town. Old money, old power, old secrets. Security cameras monitored the perimeter, but Nathan had learned from Marcus that the system was temporarily offline for upgrades, scheduled maintenance that happened to coincide with Margaret's current incarceration. At 2:17 a.m., dressed in black and moving with the silent precision that had made him an exceptional Special Forces operative, Nathan approached from the blind spot behind the garden shed. The house's security keypads had been disabled along with the cameras, but the physical locks remained formidable, heavy-duty deadbolts that would normally require noisy forced entry. Nathan had a different approach. During one of their earliest confrontations, he had noticed Margaret's house keys on a distinctive silver chain, a chain that had been inventoried and photographed when she was processed into jail. The photograph, part of the evidence Hammond had shared, showed 5 keys of different sizes and designs. With the help of a former unit member now working in security consulting, Nathan had created replicas based on the detailed intake photographs. It was a long shot, but it was the quietest option available. The 3rd key fit the back door perfectly. Inside, the house was silent and still, shrouded in the particular emptiness of a space whose occupant expects to return. Family photographs lined the hallway: Margaret and her late husband, Elaine's graduation, family vacations, all presenting the picture-perfect image of respectability that had protected their dark secrets for decades. Nathan moved directly to the study, where Ricky had described the safe behind a painting. The artwork in question was unmistakable, an imposing oil portrait of Margaret herself, younger but with the same steel in her eyes. Nathan carefully removed it from the wall, revealing the expected wall safe. The combination, 10-17-85, worked on the first attempt. Inside, he found exactly what Ricky had described: a black leather ledger, numerous files in labeled folders, and several USB drives. Nathan photographed everything in situ before removing the contents. The ledger contained meticulous records of investments dating back nearly 30 years, Names, dates, insurance policy details, payment amounts, and most disturbingly, resolution methods described in clinical terminology that barely disguise the murders they represented. Thomas Grayson. Weapon malfunction during routine cleaning. ME. Conclusion. Accidental discharge. Resolution complete. Eleanor Winters. Staircase incident induced by modified medication. ME. Conclusion. Accidental fall. Resolution complete. Sarah Miller. Vehicular malfunction on hazardous road. ME. Conclusion. Weather-related accident. Resolution complete. And then, most chillingly, an entry for Nathan himself. Deployment casualty, pending. Timeline adjusted due to legal complications. New resolution protocol in development. The folders contain supporting documentation for each investment, insurance policies, medical reports, investigation findings, and in many cases, correspondence with accomplices. One folder was labeled simply contingencies and contained what appeared to be blackmail material on various officials, including Judge Carlton's predecessor and the previous district attorney. Nathan photographed each page methodically, transmitting the images to a secure server Marcus had set up. Whatever happened next, whether he was caught, whether the physical evidence was seized or destroyed, there would be a record beyond Margaret's reach. The last folder, labeled Miller Active, contained the most disturbing contents of all: surveillance photos of Nathan, Martha, and Ethan, detailed schedules of their movements, personal information about everyone connected to Ethan's case, and most alarmingly, a recent handwritten note that read simply, "If legal remedies fail, implement Protocol Omega. Approval granted." Nathan had no idea what Protocol Omega entailed, but the clinical detachment with which Margaret documented her plans for murder left no doubt about its lethal intent. As he carefully replaced the safe's contents, after making copies of key documents, Nathan heard a sound that froze his blood: the front door opening. He silently closed the safe, replaced the painting, and moved to the study door, drawing the weapon he'd brought as a last resort. Through the crack, he could see a figure moving through the darkened hallway, too tall to be Margaret, who remained in custody, or Elaine, who had been released on bail but was required to wear an ankle monitor restricting her to her apartment. The intruder moved with purpose, familiar with the house's layout, heading directly for the study where Nathan stood concealed. As the door began to open, Nathan pressed himself against the wall, prepared for confrontation. The overhead light clicked on, revealing a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, Lawrence Brennan, Margaret Wilson's attorney. "You can come out now, Captain Miller," Brennan said calmly into the apparently empty room. "The silent alarm triggered when you opened the safe. Police have been notified." Nathan remained still, weighing his options. Brennan sighed and checked his watch. "You have approximately 4 minutes before patrol cars arrive. That's enough time for you to either leave with what you came for or explain to officers why you're breaking into my client's home." He gestured to the wall safe. "I assume Ricky told you about Margaret's record-keeping habits." Slowly, Nathan stepped into view, weapon lowered but ready. "You know what's in there. I've represented Margaret Wilson for 20 years. I know everything." Brennan's expression remained impassive. "Including what Protocol Omega entails. And you're comfortable defending a serial killer?" "I'm comfortable fulfilling my professional obligations to my client." Brennan straightened his tie. "However, as an officer of the court, I also have ethical obligations that occasionally conflict with client interests." He reached into his pocket, causing Nathan to tense, but withdrew only a business card. 3 minutes now. If you're leaving, I suggest the garden path. The neighbor's security camera on that side has been malfunctioning for weeks." Nathan studied the man's face, searching for the trap. "Why are you helping me?" "I'm not. I'm simply informing a trespasser of the most expedient exit route." Brennan placed the card on the desk. My ethical obligations are satisfied by advising you that Protocol Omega involves an accident at your current residence, scheduled for tomorrow night. The operative has been paid in advance and won't be deterred by Margaret's current incarceration. The implications hit Nathan like a physical blow. Ethan would be unfortunate collateral damage. Margaret has reached the point where containment supersedes acquisition. Brennan checked his watch again. 2 minutes, Captain Miller. I suggest you make your decision. Nathan grabbed the card and moved toward the garden exit, stopping only briefly at the door. You could have triggered the alarm as soon as I entered. Why wait until I found what I needed? Brennan's professional mask slipped just slightly, revealing something like disgust beneath. I've spent 20 years convincing myself I was just doing my job. Sometimes, even the best rationalizations fail. He turned away. I never saw you. You were never here. When the police arrive, I'll report checking the property after the alarm and finding nothing. Nathan vanished into the darkness, evidence secured, mind racing with the implications of what he'd discovered. Margaret Wilson wasn't just planning to discredit him or manipulate the legal system. She was orchestrating the murder of both Nathan and Ethan to eliminate all threats permanently. By dawn, Nathan had transmitted all evidence to multiple secure locations: Hammond's office, Marcus's personal server, and a final copy to a journalist contact from his military days, with instructions to publish everything if Nathan or Ethan were harmed. When Marcus returned from his overnight shift, Nathan laid out everything he'd discovered, including Brennan's warning about Protocol Omega. This changes everything, Marcus said, reviewing the evidence with growing alarm. Hammond can request an emergency hearing based on this. We're not just talking about child abuse anymore. This is conspiracy to commit multiple murders. Will it be enough to overcome Margaret's influence? It has to be. This goes beyond local politics. These records implicate dozens of people in at least 3 deaths, possibly more. Marcus looked up, his expression grim. But Nate, you obtained this evidence illegally. You could face charges. I don't care about charges. I care about keeping Ethan safe. I understand that. But you need to think about what happens next. If you're arrested for breaking and entering, Ethan loses you all over again. Nathan had already considered this. That's why I need one more favor. I need a head start, just enough time to get Ethan somewhere safe before this explodes. Marcus's internal conflict was visible on his face: duty versus friendship, law versus justice. 24 hours is the most I can give you. After that, Hammond needs to take this to the federal authorities. This is bigger than our department can handle. 24 hours is enough, Nathan said, determination hardening his voice. By this time tomorrow, Ethan will be safe, and Margaret Wilson's empire of secrets will be exposed for everyone to see. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, Nathan finally allowed himself to feel something like hope. The path ahead remained dangerous, the outcome uncertain, but for the first time since discovering Ethan's abuse, he had the weapons needed to fight back against the shadows that had haunted his son's life. The monsters, at last, had nowhere left to hide. 6 months later, Nathan stood at the kitchen window of their new home, watching Ethan play in the backyard with his cousin Emma. The Colorado mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped even in early spring, a constant reminder of how far they'd come from the shadows of Oak Ridge. Ethan's laughter, once so rare it had seemed like a forgotten language, now rang clear in the mountain air as he chased Emma around the swing set. He was still in therapy twice weekly, still had nightmares occasionally, still flinched at certain triggers, but the transformation had been remarkable. Dr. Lydia Hoffman, who had relocated her practice to Denver, partly to continue Ethan's treatment, called it post-traumatic growth, the capacity to not merely survive trauma but to forge something stronger from its aftermath. "Penny for your thoughts?" Kate asked, joining Nathan at the window. His sister had been their lifeline these past months, opening her home to them during the transition, helping Ethan adjust to his new school, providing the extended family stability he desperately needed. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Nathan replied, accepting the coffee she offered. "There were moments I wasn't sure we'd make it here." Those 24 hours Marcus had given them had stretched into the most intense period of Nathan's life. With Margaret's assassination plan scheduled for that night, there had been no time for legal niceties. Nathan had gathered Martha and Ethan from Marcus's house, explaining only that they needed to leave town immediately. "Is this about your promise?" Ethan had asked, still wary after their recent conflict. "About going to the mountains?" "Yes, buddy. We're going to Aunt Kate's now, today, but we need to be very quiet about it, like a secret mission." "Can you do that?" Ethan had nodded solemnly, the gravity in his young eyes reflecting an understanding beyond his years. "Because of the monsters?" "Yes. But this time, we're going to make sure they can't follow us." They had driven through the night, taking back roads, switching vehicles at a predetermined point where Kate was waiting. By dawn, they were crossing state lines, Ethan and Martha sleeping in the back seat, while Nathan maintained vigilant watch for any sign of pursuit. Meanwhile, Marcus and Hammond had moved with surgical precision, using Nathan's evidence to secure federal involvement. The FBI had executed simultaneous raids on multiple locations connected to Margaret Wilson's network, arresting 7 accomplices in 3 different states. Margaret herself, already in custody, had faced additional charges that ensured she would never know freedom again. The case had exploded across national headlines. Socialites' murder-for-profit scheme exposed. 3 decades of orchestrated accidents linked to prominent family. Child abuse case uncovers serial killer. For weeks, the story dominated news cycles, each day bringing new revelations as Margaret's carefully constructed empire of secrets collapsed. Elaine had attempted suicide when federal agents arrived to arrest her on expanded charges, though doctors had successfully intervened. In the hospital, she had made a full confession, detailing her mother's manipulations and her own complicity in both Sarah's death and the planned attempt on Nathan's life. Her testimony, combined with Ricky's cooperation and the extensive documentation Nathan had discovered, created an airtight case that not even Margaret's connections could undermine. Judge Carlton, to her credit, had recognized the extraordinary circumstances and modified the geographical restriction, allowing Nathan and Ethan to relocate to Colorado under federal protection until the trials concluded. Nathan's commanding officer had similarly adjusted his orders, approving a compassionate transfer to Fort Carson, where Nathan now served as a training instructor, home every night for dinner with his son. The legal consequences of Nathan's break-in at Margaret's estate had been quietly resolved through a combination of prosecutorial discretion and recognition of the lives his actions had saved. Hammond had argued persuasively that charging Nathan would serve no public interest, particularly given the extraordinary threats he had faced. "Martha called this morning," Kate said, interrupting Nathan's reflections. "She sounds good. Said the new hip is working better than the old one ever did." Nathan smiled at the mention of their elderly ally. Martha had relocated to a senior community just 20 minutes from their new home, refusing to be separated from her boys despite the cross-country move. Her testimony had been pivotal in the trials, her sharp memory and unwavering certainty demolishing the defense's attempts to paint her as a confused old woman. "Did she mention when she's coming for Sunday dinner?" Nathan asked. Their weekly gatherings had become a cherished ritual, a way of building the extended family Ethan had never known. Said wild horses couldn't keep her away. Oh, and she mentioned that Dr. Hoffman called her. Apparently, Ethan made a breakthrough in therapy yesterday. Nathan nodded. "He told me about it last night. He's finally able to talk about what happened in the closets without having a panic attack. Hoffman says it's a significant milestone." The healing process had been neither linear nor simple. For every step forward there had been setbacks, nightmares that left Ethan screaming in the dark, sudden regressions triggered by seemingly innocuous events, moments of anger and confusion as he processed his trauma. But through it all, Nathan had remained steadfast, learning alongside his son how to navigate the aftermath of darkness. "Captain Brave says we're safe now," Ethan had declared one night, clutching the toy soldier that had played such a pivotal role in his rescue. "He says the monsters can't find us in the mountains." Nathan had simply held him close, not contradicting the childish understanding, but slowly helping Ethan recognize that safety came not from geography, but from the people who loved him, the family they were rebuilding together. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their quiet moment. Kate went to answer while Nathan watched the children, always alert despite the peaceful setting. Old habits died hard, and vigilance had kept his son alive. "It's for you," Kate called. "Someone from the DA's office back in Oak Ridge." Nathan found a middle-aged man in a crisp suit waiting in the living room, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Captain Miller, I'm Alan Rhodes, Assistant District Attorney for Oak Ridge County. I apologize for the unannounced visit, but we thought you'd want this news in person rather than over the phone." "Has something happened with the cases?" Nathan asked, immediately concerned. The trials had concluded months ago, but appeals were ongoing, keeping the legal process alive. "No, the convictions remain secure," Rhodes assured him. "I'm here about Sarah's case specifically. As you know, we reopened the investigation into her death based on the evidence you uncovered." Nathan nodded. Margaret and Elaine had both been convicted for their roles in Sarah's murder, but the mechanic who had actually tampered with her brake lines had never been identified. "We found him," Rhodes said simply. Walter Keegan, former mechanic at East Side Auto. He was on Margaret Wilson's payroll for years, handling what she called special maintenance on targeted vehicles. Nathan felt a complex wave of emotions, grief, anger, and a strange sense of completion. Where is he now? In custody in Arizona. He fled there after Sarah's death, but the evidence trail from Margaret's records led us straight to him. He's agreed to a full confession in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Rhodes opened his portfolio and removed a sealed envelope. "He also wrote this, a letter to you and Ethan. You're under no obligation to read it, of course, but he was insistent about getting it to you." Nathan accepted the envelope warily. "Does it contain any details that might upset my son?" "No. I've reviewed it personally. It's primarily an expression of remorse, along with confirmation that Sarah's death was quick. She likely never knew what happened." Rhodes hesitated. "There's one other thing." In his confession, Keegan mentioned that Sarah had brought her car in for a regular oil change just days before the accident. She told him she was concerned about her husband, that you'd been acting strangely protective, asking about her daily routes, insisting on maintenance checks. Nathan frowned. "I never did that." "Exactly. We believe Margaret or Elaine was already laying groundwork, creating a narrative that would cast suspicion on you if questions ever arose about the accident. They were playing a very long game, Captain Miller." After Rhodes departed, Nathan sat alone with the unopened letter, unsure whether to read it or simply let Sarah's chapter close without revisiting the pain. Kate found him there, still contemplating the sealed envelope. "You don't have to open it," she said gently, "or you can save it for when you're ready." "I keep thinking about those days after her death," Nathan replied. "How alone I felt. How desperate to create stability for Ethan. I never imagined I was walking us both into another nightmare." "You couldn't have known, Nate. These people were professionals at deception. They'd been doing it for decades." Nathan finally tucked the letter away in his desk drawer. Perhaps someday he would read it, or perhaps Ethan would want to when he was older. For now, it was enough to know that the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. that the full circle of justice had finally been completed. That evening, as Nathan tucked Ethan into bed, the boy surprised him with a question. "Daddy, are you still sad about Mommy Sarah?" Nathan settled on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "I still miss her sometimes, and I'm sad that she didn't get to see what an amazing kid you're growing up to be, but I'm not sad all the time anymore." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Ms. Hoffman says it's okay to be happy even when sad things happened before. She says it doesn't mean you forget, it just means you're healing." "Ms. Hoffman is very smart," Nathan agreed, marveling at his son's resilience. "I made something for you," Ethan continued, reaching under his pillow to extract a folded piece of construction paper. "Miss Hoffman helped me with the words." Nathan unfolded the homemade card to find a child's drawing of their new house with mountains behind it. 4 figures stood in front, a tall one labeled Dad, a small one labeled Me, an older one labeled Martha, and a medium-sized one labeled Aunt Kate. Above them all, floating in the blue crayon sky, was a yellow-haired figure with wings, labeled simply Mom. Beneath the drawing, in Ethan's careful printing, were the words, "Thank you for saving me from the monsters. I love you more than all the stars. Your brave soldier, Ethan." Nathan pulled his son into a tight embrace, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. In that moment, all the risks taken, battles fought, and sacrifices made crystallized into absolute certainty. He would do it all again, 1,000 times over, to reach this point of peace. Later that night, long after Ethan had fallen asleep, Nathan sat on the porch of their mountain home, watching stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. The journey from that silent house, where he'd first heard his son's frightened whisper, to this place of healing had been brutal and beautiful, heartbreaking and hopeful. The psychological wounds would take years to fully heal. The legal aftermath would continue to require their attention. The memories would never completely fade. But sitting there under the infinite sky, Nathan finally allowed himself to believe what he'd been telling Ethan all along. The monsters couldn't reach them anymore. Not because they were hidden in the mountains. Not because locks and alarm systems kept them safe. Not because the perpetrators were behind bars. But because father and son had faced the darkness together and emerged with their bond not merely intact but strengthened, forged in fire, tested by trauma, and ultimately unbreakable. In the quiet darkness of that mountain night, Nathan whispered a promise to the stars, to Sarah's memory, to the brave little boys sleeping peacefully inside. The silence is gone for good, and whatever whispers come in the night, we'll face them together, always. Dear friends, in life's autumn years, we find ourselves reflecting on the battles we've fought and the children we've raised. Nathan and Ethan's journey reminds us that it's never too late to stand against darkness, to protect those we love, and to rebuild what's broken. Many of us understand that painful silence, the words left unsaid between generations, the whispers we pretended not to hear. But Nathan teaches us that true courage isn't found on battlefields, but in listening when a child speaks, in standing firm when systems fail, and in creating safety when the world turns harsh. Like Martha with her "In my day, we knew it took a village" wisdom, we seniors carry knowledge worth sharing and strength worth giving. No matter your age, you still have the power to be someone's hero, to break harmful cycles, to create healing spaces. Has there been a time when your experience and wisdom allowed you to protect someone vulnerable when others looked away? Or perhaps a moment when you wish someone had stood up for you the way Nathan stood for Ethan? Share your stories below, because in breaking our silence we help others find their voice too.